right? So they're difficult things to think about, but I'm just saying, from my line of work, these are all the kinds of things that we grapple with, and for each country context, you need to think about it in its own context, and but that space for dialogue is the most important thing. And right now, at least in the Iranian diaspora, I don't see it.
I would just add,
Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, that was a great answer, and I think, I'm the one, I think, who drew the parallels, but not in the sense of this is a parallel, but like my fear and my worries, and given these discussions were had very much, and some of the people in the room, colleagues of mine who we've been discussing this with, I think partly it's also seeing that struggle is a long-term struggle, that this movement already transformed the country. And I think what happened in Syria is that there was the fear that if there wasn't regime change, the regime would go back and arrest and kill every single person that went back to the street. And so we need to have the change now, or otherwise all is lost. So there was this maximalism. And when there's this maximalism, I think that became very dangerous when you saw that the only road was that the regime left us no option except violence, right? That's, I would say, a very dangerous road to go down, because in many ways, at least in Syria, the social movement undermined its own agency by viewing any change that the government did as non-existent, or basically, saying that that the movement has accomplished nothing, the movement has not really changed the regime yet, and so on. Rather than seeing it as a long-term struggle that the movement opened up the space for, potentially, basically seeing a dead end, which caused that kind of, sort of frying pan sort of atmosphere where, people turn to, whatever will then come and rescue them from that. And the government is not blameless in this. The government, a wise government will say, look, we don't want to go to escalate to the end game of a civil war. We are actually going to start addressing those grievances. So it's on both sides in many ways, but it is under a context which is really, really constrained. And I think that's what we have to be worried about.
We have one question here. How many more do we have after that? One, two. Okay, so let's do these two first, and then we'll do those two at the back.
Thank you so much. First of all, because we know you and the organization that you are related to that, and that's to justifying.
What, my organization?
No, NIH. Justifying brutal regimes of Iran. And what are you? I have a clear question for you. If I'm right now, first of all, I want to say something to you. If we only sit here and don't be critics, we only are at a statue. I want to ask a question. You are saying that we have to keep open the embassy of Iran. If right now I attack you and beating you to death, what you are doing and what other people have or must to do, only observing and saying that, we have a good vibes for you, it's what you have to do, you must to do. And also, I want to ask that with keeping open the embassy of Iran, after 44 years, what we had right now, and about the Syria, if Islamic Republic of Iran didn't send military to the Syria to kill the people, never Syrian people had reached to this situation that we are seeing right now. It was because the interference of the Iranian regime's military. it's a clear question. If, right, I attack you and I want to kill you, what is your reaction? And what is other person's reaction? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's, Sanam, can we take
Yeah, sure.
two and then go on to the other two?
The question will be really short, possibly completely wrong headed. But, I was thinking back about the overarching narratives question, how they might constrain and possibly be changed. And thinking about the comment you made early on about how world news were among the first in Iran have some sort of political resistance. So I was wondering if maybe part of what's happening now also has part of the overarching narrative from the Iran-Iraq war, and that murder as a narrative is, in fact, was kind of this perception, but also maybe also the action.
Thank you. Should we go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things. Thank you for your comment. So you referred to the organization that I was affiliated with, the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, which is a Iranian American community organization. I was on the board a few years. I think I stopped being on the board in 2017, 2018. I joined the board because it was an organization that has, for the first time, was providing Iranian Americans in this country the space to learn what it means to be a citizen and have political voice. So they dealt with things like student visas, they dealt with things like the Muslim ban and so forth. And they were the only organization also that was willing to think about US foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran. And again, for me, being somebody who was very wary of what happens when you have interventions, wars, and what happens, how bad sanctions can be, I was very much aligned with the idea that, whatever we can do to avoid more harm being done from the outside world to the Iranian public, given the harm that was being done to them by the state, by the regime, it's worth trying to work on that. I don't think many people remember or are aware of how close the prospect of bombing was in 2015 when the JCPOA was signed. I was on a call a few weeks ago with the German Foreign Ministry, and there was somebody from the German Foreign Ministry on, and she said it was very real, right? So these are moments of history when things change. And what's interesting around this idea of being affiliated with this organization is that it's become so normalized to say, oh, if you're affiliated with NIAC, you're a regime apologist, you're a lobbyist of the regime, and so forth. Financially, it's impossible. A lobbyist has to have financial dealings. It's a charity. It's a 501c3 charity. All of their finances are evident for everybody to see, and legally, given the sanctions and so forth, and how much attention they're resigning to with Iran, trust me, it would have been impossible. That said, if you'd like to know my own personal history and what my family is, and what we've been through with the Iranian regime, you would never assume that I would be affiliated with an organization that had anything to do with what the regime wanted. So the attack is there already, right? You're already attacking my credibility by assuming my affiliation. And I'm trying to say to you that I would ask you to answer, to rethink some of the assumptions and some of the things that are being said. And then secondly, coming back to the issues that you were saying about whether if somebody is attacked or the embassies. What I'm talking about is if Germany closes down the Iranian embassy in Germany, Iran will close down the German embassy in Iran, right? That's reciprocal diplomatic action. It happens all the time. What I worry about is that as these protests and as the movement is going forward, you can always close down the embassies later. If you do it too soon, there is also the risk that we could end up like North Korea or like Venezuela, where God knows what's going on, and nobody has any attention. So it's a question of, it's not about legitimating the regime, it's a question of saying, what is the best way to show solidarity with people on the ground? If somebody has argued that at the moment the best thing is to completely shut down, and as I say, create that reciprocal thing so that the French and the Germans and whoever else is there still is sent packing home, and that's a good thing, let's have the discussion. Let's have that conversation. I don't have the answers. All I'm saying is that in other places I've seen this happen, it has turned out to be to the detriment of the local population, right? That's my first. The second thing that I would say is that when we look at the Western world, and I bring this back to the story of Afghanistan, when the US pulled out of Afghanistan, when Zalmay Khalilzad sat down and negotiated with the Taliban and released 5,000 Talibs and never thought about the well-being of the Afghan population, and everybody came back to their home base, the world pivoted. The Western world has pivoted. Their focus right now is on Ukraine and their own well-being. They do not care anymore about whether you have human rights abuses in India, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, frankly, in Iran, or elsewhere. Right now, the attention on Iran is there because of the amazing work of the diaspora and everybody who's, but do they care? Are they going to open their doors and say, hey, come on over if things are bad? Seriously, I don't see it. I don't see. In Britain, we have Afghan and Iranian political asylees, people who have fled Iran because of political issues. There's a Home Secretary who wants to deport everybody and send them to Rwanda. Send them to Rwanda. That's the state of England right now. They're not opening the doors. And so, again, my perspective is that I look at these issues and I look at how the world is revolving around everything and saying, I hope to God it doesn't happen to another country. This time it happens to be the country of my birth. I have personal ties. I would love to be able to go and visit my father's grave. I can't. They've taken everything away from us. I can't do it. I know that. But I also don't want it to, I also recognize that things can get worse. And it's that navigating in that space of saying, how do we as outsiders make sure that we're not inadvertently doing more harm or creating more difficulties for people that are there. So that's really been the narrative of my work, and I hope that makes sense to you. Thank you. In terms of what you were saying about martyrdom, it's interesting, and what I see is that the protesters have taken up a lot of the narrative that the state, so for example, in the Iran-Iraq War, in 1986 when I went back, they had a fountain in one of the biggest cemeteries in Iran. It was in red, they put red dye in it, it's the blood of the martyrs. Well, the artists are now using that same imagery in ponds and in Tehran. They've had that kind of. The language of the mothers of the children that have died talk about martyrdom. Now, historically, we've used the word shaheed before. It's not just a revolution, or it's not just the last 40 years. It's been part of the discourse. But to see them twisting it and using it now for this cause, I think, is also quite interesting. And also, the other thing which is extraordinary is that the people who are dying or being attacked or on the streets are the children of the vets of the Iran-Iraq War, right? So it's not like they can say, oh, it's just the rich kids and whatever. It's really everybody that's their own children. It's the children of these 43 years that are out there. So it really is quite extraordinary to see the courage and the tenacity.
Take the last